All right, we're going to get started here. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our virtual webinar with Sehome High School. In today's visit, Sehome will be sharing an in-depth look at co-teaching, co-planning, co-assessing. At the Herring Center for Inclusive Education at the University of Washington, we continue to be thrilled to partner with OSBI in our exemplary demonstration schools. We took the feedback from the earlier cohort webinar attendees who repeatedly mentioned that they wanted to hear more about some of the specific inclusionary practices being utilized in their schools. So here we are today to do just that, taking a deep dive into co-teaching, co-assessing, and co-planning with Sehome High School in our third demonstration school site. Joining us today are inclusion specialists from the Herring Center for Inclusive Education. My name is Christina Novak, and I'll be walking us through the webinar today. Cassie Martin, our project director, and other members of the Herring Center team are also joining us today. And our project coordinator, Molly Lyman, is also here in the case you experience any technological issues. Before we dive in, let's make sure we have everything ready to get started. So as we get started, please test your audio in the bottom left-hand corner of the menu. And then thank you for sharing comments and ideas in the chat. If you'd like our presenters to answer a question, please use the Q&A feature so the questions are not lost in the chat. We will be recording today's webinar, and it will be provided on the Herring Center's demonstration sites webpage. The recording from today will be available by the end of this month. As we go through the webinar, please keep this webinar etiquette in mind. We encourage a growth mindset where you're open to thinking about new ideas and are willing to push yourself to grow. Thank you for joining us today, for being present, positive, and engaged. So let's take a minute to practice in the chat. Please share what impact you hope today's webinar will have on your school's inclusionary practices. We will be able to reference this information later, and it'll be useful for us in future planning. Again, friendly reminder that if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens, and we'll do our best to monitor and respond to your questions over the course of the presentation. So yeah, if you have the capacity, please drop us a little comment in the chat on what you hope to get out of today's presentation. So to start, here's a little background information on the Demonstration Sites project. In the fall of 2019, OSPI launched the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project. The Herring Center partnered with OSPI to coordinate and lead this part of the larger statewide project, creating model demonstration sites that highlight inclusionary practices across Washington state. The Demonstration Sites project was developed to provide educators from around the state with the opportunity to observe inclusionary practices in action, meet with school teams, collect artifacts that aid in system change, and learn how to implement inclusionary practices in different school contexts. Our demonstration sites highlight the diversity of our state. They include urban schools, rural schools, and schools in some of our largest and smallest districts across Washington. In collaboration with the Herring Center Inclusion Specialists, the original intention and future intention of this project is for demonstration sites to host visiting schools to showcase high-leverage inclusionary practices. By sharing these practices and opening their doors to teachers, administrators, families, and community members, it allows visitors to see best practices in action and apply them in their schools. At the same time, the demonstration sites themselves continue to grow their inclusive cultures and refine their practices that contribute to equitable learning for all students. Clearly, right now we have some constraints around literally opening our doors, but have pivoted to continue to provide transformational learning using virtual platforms. And this is how you will hear today about Sehome High School's inclusive educational journey. There are some founding principles that drive our model demonstration sites work. In every school, there are things that are working well. In education, we have the tendency to examine the problems associated with our practice instead of examining what's working well and why it's working well, and how we can use that information to make things better. This asset-based approach is more productive ways for school to leverage their strengths to become more inclusive. Also, inclusion is not a special education initiative, but a cultural shift in philosophy and practice. If we simply change the way we deliver special education services Without considering the culture of our school and how all students engage in teaching and learning, we will never make the changes we need to truly impact student learning. Through this course of our webinars and by way of scheduling virtual visits, districts, schools, and communities can learn more about what steps are taken to make these shifts to be a more inclusive school. What is exciting about demonstration sites is that they're in various stages of their journeys, and whether they're in year 1 of their journey or they're 6 years in, they all have plans for continuous improvement. They recognize that as new students enter their buildings or join in virtually, and as they collect more information about best ways students learn, that their professional practices need to reflect that learning in responsive and meaningful ways. In just a minute, we're happy to hand it over to the team of our 3rd cohort of demonstration sites at Sehome High School in Bellingham, Washington. In their last webinar, Sehome shared their journey to becoming a more inclusive school. For our purposes today, we are going to highlight and take an in-depth look at how Sehome High School co-teaches, co-plans, and co-assesses. Thank you for joining us, and after a short poll, we'll hand it over to the team at Sehome. So we'd love to start with some polling to see who's joining us today. Please reference the chat for the link of the poll, and we're very happy to introduce the team at Sehome. Looks like we have a lot of administrators joining us today, teachers, some district representatives, specialists, other. Thank you all for polling, and I'll hand it over to Sehome.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today for our deep dive into co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing. A huge thank you to the University of Washington Herring Center for welcoming us and for all your work to support inclusionary practices in Washington. I'm excited to see many of you here. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sonia Cole. I'm the principal of Sehome High School. This is my 7th year working at Sehome. I worked for 4 years as a teacher, 1 as an assistant principal, and this is my 2nd year as the principal. Today, we will hear from part of our team working to improve our outcomes for all of our students by using inclusionary practices. Okay. Sehome High School is located in the beautiful Bellingham, Washington. We are part of the Bellingham Public Schools. There are 3 comprehensive high schools and 1 alternative high school. Sehome currently has approximately 1,200 students enrolled. We opened for hybrid instruction on March 8th, and we had previously been doing remote learning since March 13th of last year. If you'd like to hear more about some more information on our journey with inclusionary practices, I invite you to view our previous webinar and presentation that is posted on the UW Inclusionary Practices website. Today, we will be digging into our co-teaching, also known as our co-serving model. In the previous webinar, there was additional information about master scheduling and the systems necessary to make co-teaching possible. I invite you to check out or check that out on the website, or you can always reach out to me with any questions. I'm happy to share what I've learned on this journey and how the master schedule is the system to make inclusion possible. For reference, in the chat, I saw some of you are working towards moving towards a fully inclusionary practice. That's our goal as well. Right now, we currently have 112 students who are served with an IEP. We have 25 co-taught classes on our master schedule for next year. We'll continue to have a resource math class supporting some of our students with unique needs in math. And then we have 13 students who are served in a life skills program, but are also included in the general education setting as much as possible. We are working towards having every staff member, every student, and every community member being part of making inclusion possible. I'm going to get choked up. This happens every time, so get ready. All right, it was going to happen sooner or later. Here it is. We believe it takes an entire community to create an inclusive environment. Today, you have the distinct opportunity to listen and learn from some amazing educators who are also on the co-teaching journey. All of these people are teachers first. Some of them are experts in content areas, and others are the ones making content accessible for all learners. You'll notice that all of our titles are educators. All of us play a vital role in classrooms every day. All right, inclusive regular schools are the most effective means of combating discriminatory attitudes, creating welcoming communities, and building an inclusive society, and achieving education for all. Let that sink in for just a moment. We often use the term inclusion to refer specifically to students with disabilities. However, our larger vision of inclusion applies to all students. Inclusive practices aim to dismantle the systems that marginalize, silence, and restrict students based on race, ethnicity, gender identity, socioeconomic status, ability, language, and culture. Inclusive practices are about access and opportunity. They are about representation, anti-racism, and empowerment. The original goal of inclusion is to support students with disabilities. You can see some of the direct benefits listed here. Which one of these most surprises you? We know that some of the benefits for students with disabilities include academically outperforming students in segregated settings. We know that almost 5 times more likely to graduate on time, twice as likely as non-included peers to enroll in some form of post-secondary education. They're 11% more likely to be employed and earn approximately $2,100 more per year. They're 10% more likely to live independently and 75% more likely to earn a vocational or academic credential. However, the benefits do not stop with just students with disabilities. There are also benefits for students without. It reduces fear of human differences. It creates increased comfort and awareness, growth in social cognition, improvements in self-confidence, development of personal, moral, and ethical principles, and a warm and caring friendship. I would argue that the greatest benefit to the entire community is connection and community with all of the members of our world. We are better when we are different, and bringing strengths and differences only enhances our community. In our introductory webinar, we share this slide that thinks about co-teaching in 3 different areas: co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing. In a recent conversation and continued learning in this area, we have started to reframe the thinking to co-serving. We're really working as a team to serve all of our students in our learning community. Now, the moment you all came here for, you get to hear from some incredible educators about how they make these lofty ideas a reality in classrooms for kids every single day. We will start by looking at the co-planning part of this process.
All right, let's get this thing going. We are Erin Ferda and Steve Terreri, AKA Team Ferdereri. We've been co-teaching together for the last 3 years, and we're going to introduce you to co-planning by sharing some of the work that we've done with our world myth and science fiction electives. Before we start that dive, we want to strongly emphasize 2 things. Co-planning is crucial to successful co-teaching. It's where you'll make decisions, get to know each other, develop trust that separates successful partnerships from those that don't work out, and develop a shared sense of purpose about why inclusion matters and how to make it work. That being said, each team will adopt a co-planning method or style that fits them. Nothing we present about our co-planning is absolute, except that it needs to happen and it needs to be supported with common planning time in the schedule.
Well, Team Ferdereri shares an attitude about co-planning that emphasizes its importance to our co-teaching. We plan in a dedicated space where we won't be interrupted. We schedule it as a meeting and not to be missed or postponed. We put up signs on our door that we're doing important work and should only be interrupted by true emergencies. That attitude has to start with us, the member of the team, before it gets communicated to all the folks who might otherwise see your co-planning as a time you're available for a conference or a question or any of the other many things that keep teachers busy outside of classroom instruction. Now, ideally, we meet as often as we teach, even if it's 5-minute check-in. We plan about a week ahead of what we're doing in class. And it is ongoing, because no matter how many times Ferd and I have done a class together, every group of kids we get is different and brings constantly changing challenges.
Co-planning is also ongoing because there's so much more to successful partnering than you might imagine going into it. It took our team about a year just to tease out learning targets and all the lessons and activities that we did in science fiction and fantasy. And then we needed time to develop transparent assessment tools that encourage kids to use feedback and improve work. We continue to tweak these tools for new lessons, and through it all, we keep asking ourselves how we translate kids' work into a semester grade. We take time at the beginning of the year to readdress and discuss these overarching decisions, and then we revisit them continuously throughout the year. We've been fortunate to get to co-teach additional English classes together, and our initial work together helped immensely in giving us a foundation 2 years later when we started co-teaching English 101.
Now, where it starts for us, we begin a new semester and we take the unit template from a previous semester and start asking fundamental questions. What worked well? What can be improved? How much time do we give to a particular lesson or activity? Some questions never seem to go away, like how do we do more practice or formative assessment to make summative evaluations less frequent but more meaningful? Now, having done the class together for a few years, we have a lot more content than we need, and it gives us choices about exactly what we're going to do. On the other hand, because science fiction and fantasy keeps evolving, and world myth and folklore is just so big, we also bring in new resources and materials each semester. So when Ferd and I talk about issues of the day, what kids think is relevant, what's happening in our culture, we're not just having a social chat or taking a break from getting the calendar filled up. We're keeping the edge of our class sharp, building and maintaining a reputation as a serious academic course that engages and challenges all kids, while nurturing our own imaginations and passions that we pass on to our students during instruction. That investment does not happen without serious co-planning.
On the surface, the way we co-plan is easy to describe. We sit down together, we talk about what we want to accomplish, we start with learning objectives, and we determine which resources we'll use that will best facilitate learning, and we work out how to make it accessible to all students. But there's actually so much more that takes place in these conversations. I wish that we'd been secretly filmed at some point so that we could share some of our planning conversations with you, because we both feel that they have been transformational. Many teachers, especially high school teachers, are used to working independently. We make decisions on our own, and we rarely need to justify our thinking to others. In co-planning, we have to constantly articulate our beliefs, perspectives, and choices about instructional practices. We're constantly learning from each other while affirming each other's viewpoint. The process builds trust, confidence, and energy that has a notable positive effect on our class culture. But the reason it works comes from our core value, our belief that all kids can learn enriching, age-appropriate content and skills when the school community comes together in a concerted effort to teach them. Co-planning that focuses on our learners is truly transformative for the kids as well as the team.
You know, as a team, our fun days are like the partnership of Han Solo and Chewbacca. We like to think of this as our classroom persona, with each of us easily stepping into Han's role or Chewie's on any given day. Our planning makes little distinction between the ELA and the exceptional ed credential. Both of our names are posted by our door. We're both listed as science fiction or world myth teachers. All emails, assignments, and communications include both of our names, and we insist that kids and families include both of us when sending us emails or chat. Teaming this way honors the difference between the horror movie lover and the Studio Ghibli fan. It strategically applies loud versus quiet, slapstick silliness versus deadpan wit, and the impulse to just dive into the unknown versus preparing for unintended consequences and having supporting resources we'll be happy to have if we need them. And that way, Team Fertarelli is really more like Fox Mulder and Dana Scully from the X-Files. While we may each take lead on different elements of a unit or assignment, we make almost all decisions together, big or small. We've been known to spend a lot of time negotiating due dates, discussing terminology and rubrics, and debating font type. English teachers get particular about these things. When we share and discuss as part of our planning, we realize the scientific truth that diversity indeed is strength. What we bring as individuals to our content, our lessons, and our practice makes the whole better. This appears in all aspects of our partnership, including feedback for IEP goals, attending IEP meetings, family communication, instruction, grading, providing accommodations and modifications, entering assignments into the gradebook. It's all shared. And when the team stops thinking in terms of yours and mine and starts embracing ours, the mutual respect and trust follows. It's a truly cool, beautiful thing.
Hi, I'm Kevin Candela. This is my 22nd year teaching and just my 3rd year here at Sehome. I'm currently teaching geometry, algebra 2, and a self-contained special education math class that we call Math Skills.
And my name's Todd Leda. This is my 21st year teaching and 21st year at Sehome. My area of expertise I consider to be mainly geometry and AP calculus.
So you can't teach without a plan. So it all starts here.
Kevin and I want to acknowledge that we each have our own unique perspectives, and we are just sharing what we have found works for us. A plan starts with a philosophy. Sehome's geometry teachers start with an application and see how many concepts, standards are embedded in one application. This is key because all students benefit from continual revisiting of meaningful, hands-on scenarios with multiple approaches for depth and confirmation. The application on this slide is the centroid, or the center mass of a triangle. GeoGebra, Desmos, and algebraically are 3 approaches to examine the same concept of the centroid.
So this tangible sort of go-to situation is an intentional content support because it provides comfort, depth, relevance, and most importantly, some confidence through experiencing success and familiarity. The application is that comfortable environment for all students to work within. So please don't try to read this next slide. This is just screenshots of a couple different documents that were put together, but it's meant to just illustrate that this planning started with a very deliberate collaborative process. The math department at the district level invited me to participate in some summer work around curriculum adaptation for the remote learning environment. So mostly it was an opportunity for me to listen and learn. Todd is the content expert, so his input was really important for me to hear. The daily plans were very intentional about creating equal airtime. So we each have our own strengths and we try to capitalize on those. And we meet each morning to make sure that we know exactly what each of us will do for that day. Todd is really instrumental in suggesting a starting point for me that's relative to the content, the overall content goal for that day. So each day we discuss how to adapt and modify and organize the assignment. The design of each daily assignment is very intentional. We start with a universally accessible entry point for learning about that concept. And then as students move down the page, the content becomes more challenging and ends with a sort of open-ended bonus type question.
The first two questions on every page are designed to be accessible, fun, and relatively quick for everybody, all student participants. Every student's then experience satisfaction, and this is important, a taste of success each and every day to begin. We verified that every student completed the first two prompts each day. Because we know they are accessible and the core content for the day, remember the intentionality of an applications. We remember that the intentionality of applications are being revisited. Modeling positions of objects such as a hockey puck sliding on ice, keys free falling, and baseballs being thrown are the consistent daily application for the first scenario that you see here. We spent an unbelievable 10 instructional days on just this one application, but all the different standards or core contents that were covered were applied trigonometry, vectors, parametric equations, linear and quadratic equations, just to name some of the content. And this again just gives students that comfortable baseline. All students kept revisiting the same idea each day with these projectile motions.
So that previous slide was sort of the baseline, and then this is an example of just some modifications to a page. So the notes are embedded directly into the work for that day, and scaffolding can include the formatting of the page, those embedded notes, suggestions for strategies, or even examples of finished work. Modifications might include things like changing fractions to whole numbers, or shortening the number of prompts on any one page, reordering the prompts, or using a modified criteria for success. For example, we might say, for this particular student, finishing the first prompt is a reasonable goal for today.
You may remember I talked about really checking and making those first two questions accessible and fun. We evaluate work daily and we look for patterns by students, but also for patterns within a particular page. How did today go? This feedback is crucial for conversations and collaboration around what happens tomorrow. What review might be helpful? What clarifications are needed? What are we ready to expand upon? Most importantly, we assess daily without the students feeling like they are being assessed. Students never see scores, only written or verbal feedback or check-ins.
So we said it all starts with a plan, but it doesn't end with a finished plan. It's a little contrived to try to separate this into co-planning, co-teaching, co-assessing as discrete categories because it's an ongoing cycle. So our planning lays the groundwork, and then our assessment gives us the feedback we need to adjust, plan, teach, and assess, and around it goes.
Co-planning goes hand in hand with each part of this process. You can't have one of them without the other. Through co-planning, teachers are able to co-instruct. Let's hear more about some of the strategies teachers use to implement co-instruction to support all learners.
Hello, my name is Lisa Vile, and my co-teacher Shannon Casey and I prepared a video discussing the power of co-instructing and how we supported a class project. Hello, my name is Lisa Vile, and I'm an exceptional education teacher here at Sehome High School.
Hi, I'm Shannon Casey. And I'm an English teacher also here at Sehome.
We are new teaching partners who have been teaching 2 classes of media studies and creative writing during remote learning. Shannon and I did not know each other before this year. We were asked to co-teach. Fortunately for both of us, it was a great match and we were grateful to have each other this year. Shannon and I have personalities that lend to a more laid back and organic approach when it comes to delivering instruction. So we don't spend much time deciding who's going to say what. We spend a great deal of our time reflecting on class lessons, projects, and student work to determine our next steps to meet student need. One priority for both of us, especially this year, is cultivating and creating a safe environment where students can take personal and intellectual risks. This has resulted in a collaborative family-like environment. Shannon and I think this class cohesion is a critical foundation of optimal learning. In both creative writing and media studies, we design most of our assignments to provide more autonomy to the students. We invite participation in multiple written, verbal, and media formats, and offer an element of choice so that students are empowered and take ownership of their learning. Shannon has also worked as an exceptional education teacher, so she views the curriculum she teaches through a universally designed lens and provides scaffolds for all of the assignments and projects. We use a variety of high-quality graphic organizers and resources that help students arrange their thinking as they progress through their work. Also, we modify the amount of content and other requirements regularly. If an alternative assignment is a better fit for a student, then we will make an effort to create and customize the assignment for that student. Shannon's going to now share about a project that we presented in our class. She's going to discuss the purpose, some student work, and also resources we created for the students.
We designed a project called Voices of Truth, and the students chose a current topic that they were passionate about and utilized creative media to communicate a message about positive change. This is just a snapshot of what the project, an overview of the project, the learning target, and the success criteria vary from elevating student voices to investigating and evaluating sources on the current issue, and then also including a message and call to action. We provided a variety of activities for them to demonstrate and have opportunities to demonstrate their learning. And then for the assessment, we provided a variety of assessment where we could evaluate student projects. The purpose of this Voices of Truth project was to have students understand the effects of media and evaluate current issues, to create and produce their own media, and then to provide a call of action about their issue. The element of choice for this project was motivating for the students. They chose their own topics. It allowed for diverse interest as well as academic ability. And most important, they were personally connected to their work, so they were invested in producing the best type of media that they could. Here's an example of one of the projects. This student created the children's book. Her topic was Black Lives Matter, and she created a children's story to promote empathy and anti-racism.
3 students who are English language learners and did not know how to speak English 5 years ago got together and wanted to do a podcast to discuss misinformation around vaccines. Because there are 2 teachers in the room, we had the luxury of time, valuable time to spend with these students, and not only these students, but all students. We were able to help students research their work. In this situation, we could help them script what they're going to say, apply technology, and practice recording. At the end, they were very proud of their professional product.
Here's a checklist that we used midway through the project, and this simplified all the steps that they had to take in the project. And the students liked this. They said it really helped keep them organized. Because they had a choice of a wide variety of media formats, we provided a media format resource page where there's links to programs and resources for them to access. And they didn't have to do that, find those on their own, and they found this very helpful. We were still remote during that time, so the presentations, we wanted the listeners and the viewers to have some ownership in the presentation as well. So they provided feedback, and we gave this presentation guidelines to them. We gave some responsibilities to the viewers as well as the presenters, and it helped them give great, extraordinary presentations. During a school year, unlike any other, the power of co-teaching not only benefits our students, but it also enhances our growth as a teaching team. We also had a student teacher. Together, we've been able to combine our individual strengths and produce innovative and relevant content that motivates students to fulfill their potential. From the students' perspective, they see us as a united team that they trust. This resonates into a collaborative class culture who embrace diverse viewpoints and encourage each other to evolve as students and as people.
Hello, my name is Lee.
Hi, it's Kevin Candela here again. Todd and I, our approach to co-teaching derives from a shared belief that all students can and should have the opportunity to learn about geometry. So we set the tone just right from day one. This is our class. We consistently use we, even if only one of teacher actually worked on something. We use we just to emphasize the shared ownership and delegation of all the work that goes into co-teaching.
We equally take responsibility to ensure that each student is getting what they need as best as we're able to provide. We each have strengths in terms of our own prior experience and knowledge of the content, but as much as possible, we really do blend our roles as best we can.
So I think the big idea is that all students have a legal right and deserve to have an opportunity for success. So given that, our role as teachers is to do everything we can to make sure that we provide multiple pathways for students to follow in order to get there. So here's a few brief clips of each of us providing instruction, followed by a series of students providing their perspective on co-teaching.
I'm going to swing a third arc. Boom, just like that. 1, 2, 3 separate arcs. Okay, the last step is to take a ruler this time, and I'm going to connect that same vertex I started with down here with the point of intersection of those second and third arcs. I'm going to line my ruler up just like that, and then I'm going to just draw that segment or ray there, and that is an angle bisector.
Now let's go ahead and solve for the vertical side. We're going to call this v of y for vertical velocity. That's the opposite leg, so we will use sine. We'll take the sine of the 56-degree angle, and that is equal to the ratio of the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is 10. That's v of y. So same process, just now we're going to use that decimal value for the sine of 56 degrees. So 0.8290. We still have v of y over 10. And we'll multiply both sides of this equation by 10 to find what v of y is.
I'll make this quick. Mr. Candela is going to go over some algebraic representation of the projectiles that we're doing. So our focus our focus is always and will continue to be the graphical, but we also want to introduce some algebraic representation for this.
Cool. Thanks, Mr. Leda. Graphically, that sort of verifies what we did algebraically. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Leda, who's going to talk to us about how this situation can be used to model motion and whether or not both of these solutions would make sense.
Thanks, Mr. Candela.
What's it like having two geometry teachers?
Oh, I'm able to like ask one of them questions, and I'm able to get extra support on being able to have two teachers there. And if one of them is busy, I can ask the other one. And so it's easier to, instead of having one teacher, I'm able to get extra support with having two teachers.
It's fun because I feel like there's a lot of energy in the class, and you get to kind of have two aspects to like different people explaining one thing, so you get two understandings.
Cool.
It's interesting to have two different perspectives in learning different activities, and it kind of, I'd say it's more helpful to have two sets of ears that you can like talk to, so it's not just one person that you have to rely on. Yeah.
I like that if I have a question, I can get both perspectives, and that if like they have to work with another student, it's not like I'm waiting a really long time to get my question answered. And I like that when you're teaching the topics, there's like two different ways of explaining it. Like there's a visual way, and then there's like a way you're like showing how the equations work and stuff, so I get two different sides.
It's nice because you can have one teacher kind of like giving like a general class instruction while also having, you know, a second teacher giving like in-person, like just like helping individual people who need help with stuff. It's good because you get two perspectives and just, you know, double the brain power. So yeah, it's nice.
So the students in this video are a mix of students with and without disabilities that's proportional to the class itself. And the students had no idea what I was going to ask them until I pulled them out in the hall and I said, hey, do you mind if I record your answer to a question that for a webinar that Mr. Leda and I are doing? So it was just cold answers.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Gwen Nyman, and I have been a teacher here at Sehome for 6 years, but I'm on my 27th year of teaching so far. So today I want to talk about this idea of co-instructing, and we've seen some national data at the beginning of the presentation that supports co-teaching, but I'd like to share a more personalized vision of why a school should offer inclusive, co-taught, push-in type classes. As I said, I've been an English teacher for 27 years, but fresh out of college, I was 23 and teaching in a fairly small rural school district. The curriculum guidance I received from my department of 3 was to teach Lord of the Flies. I was so green, such a rookie, and when a tall, lanky young man with cowboy boots and a baseball cap came in, and I want to say, I've been thinking about this, I want to say his name was Ryan, but I can't remember, so we're going to call him Ryan, but he could not read the first paragraph of Lord of the Flies, and that was our grade level novel for the class. I met with a special education teacher who sometimes came to class to help the students with IEPs. We tried to come up with a plan for Ryan to read the text during the pull out resource room time that he had. It was 1993, there was no Audible, there was no Learning Ally, there were no Spark Notes. The best we could hope for was a 12 cassette tape version of the book, coupled with a boom box in the corner with communal headphones. Did Ryan read this novel? No. Could he write the essay that was assigned on the text that he hadn't read? No. but he could regurgitate the plot and characters thanks to Cliff Notes and a patient resource room teacher. However, was this true learning? Did this young man grow at all in his reading, writing, and vocabulary skills? Probably not. I felt like I'd failed him, and to tell you the truth, I still kind of do. I figure this young man, Ryan, must probably be 43 years old by now, and I wonder what he does for a living. I wonder if he has children, and I wonder if they struggle with learning like he did. So my next step was to graduate. My next step was to go to graduate school and do a master's program in special education, focusing specifically on strategies for teacher instruction and student learning in order to make knowledge more accessible for all. I quickly had a toolbox of tactics to help reach more pupils in my classroom. I continued for 20 years, working mostly in the isolation of my English classroom, creating graphic organizers for writing essays, designing metacognitive markers for close reading, puzzling out jigsaw activities to invite collaboration, and photocopying class calendars, checklists, etc. for students to track due dates and what they'd accomplished. It was exhausting. I think I was making a positive impact, but was I reaching every student? There were just many that simply fell through the cracks of this rickety scaffolding that I'd created. Sometimes there were 30 of them, and once I even shuddered, there were 36, but there was only just one of me, always one of me. So over the years, there were paraeducators and special education teachers assigned to my class to pull out individuals or small groups to oversee their written work or to read the text out loud while others read silently. My statistics were dismal. One year, the principal talked to me because I literally had the most Fs of any teacher at the school. My expectations were high and I didn't feel right about dumbing down the curriculum so kids could simply pass. I wanted them to learn skills to support all of their classes. I was trying to track progress in reading, writing, grammar, and organization. My data was all anecdotal, but it did show that students were making progress, but some simply too little and too late. So what could be done? How could I take ownership in both their successes and failings? Better yet, how could I create an environment that fostered them taking ownership of their own learning? The answer was co-teaching. But what does it mean to really co-teach? How is it different from what I had done for so long? I wondered, I worried, would I have to change my expectations? Would I have to change my curriculum, my individuality? I'm an old dog and I wasn't sure if I was up for the new tricks. But what I learned was that co-teaching means two people are doing two jobs with equal status. You've heard this a couple times today. There is a sharing of the load of presenting information, activities, and assessments with balanced airtime, responsibilities, and roles. I didn't have to give up my teaching philosophies, but I did have to compromise and I did have to learn flexibility. The actual performance of co-instructing is, in my opinion, the easy part. If the planning process happens well, then the rest can be kind of easy. When looking at a lesson or a class period, it's important to divide tasks somewhat evenly and then revisit throughout the day as we move from class to class. Every day, preferably before the school day begins, there needs to be a check-in. This doesn't need to be formal, but you need to know, where are we going today and how are we going to get there? Monique and I like to put an agenda on the board for the students, but really it is for ourselves too. We color coordinate it by roles. Each activity is a color that corresponds with the teacher who's kicking it off. This helps balance our airtime, but we also choose the activities that we feel that we like, or that we feel the most comfortable with, or that we simply love to teach. This includes who is formally greeting the class with the "let's get started" and who's in the back taking attendance. If we're sharing a PowerPoint, we will switch off slide by slide or topic by topic. Each day requires this check-in to see who has what role. It's very intentional. Co-teachers sharing a classroom is ideal. You'll hear that many times today. It establishes both teachers as equal. One is not a guest in another's domain. Both personalities are represented in the classroom decor and culture. Supplies and space are shared, but not necessarily communal. I don't ever sit at Monique's desk or use things from her area. but we have common spaces with shared cupboards and school materials, coffee mugs, sometimes even treats. This can definitely nurture mutual respect, but it is also a constant reminder of the flexibility needed for co-teaching to take place. Students view both teachers as equals in their correspondingly shared environment, and this ties back to the practice of inclusivity. It models respect for others, tolerance, patience, etc. So co-instructing can feel like an orchestrated dance. Sometimes it's a well-choreographed waltz, and other days, well, I hope you're old enough to remember Elaine's infamous moves on Seinfeld. Body placement is key in co-instructing. It's important for each teacher to know where to stand in the classroom in proximity to the partner. A sure way to lose credibility with your students is to have your equal stand in front of you, blocking you like a solar eclipse. Some of this movement around the room is instinctual and natural. Some is carefully planned and extremely intentional. Either way, on any day, both teachers should be visible and actively participating in this instructional dance. Monique and I tend to naturally split the room. If she's up front, then I'm monitoring from the back and vice versa. While one is leading instruction, the other is actively involved on the opposite end of the room. The non-leading teacher is never not present nor engaging actively. In other words, it's not one person teaches while the other grades or answers emails or goes to the staff lounge. However, the benefit of co-instructing is that one teacher is not always on stage the entire period. So this does free the other one up if needed to send an email, to check in with an administrator, or better yet, meet one-on-one with a student who's been absent or who's having a rough day or simply needs a check-in. Language is also key in establishing a collaborative message. I becomes we, mine becomes ours, as we've said. At first, this can be a difficult switch, especially if you're used to being an independent contractor, but there is great power and relief in sharing responsibility. Attendance rosters, schedules, and door signs include both teachers' names with equal billing. On every assignment, we have both teachers' names, and we require students to do the same. Emails, messages to students and families come from both teachers. Monique and I just go alphabetically. Carpenter, Nyman. It just was an easy decision. We also messaged that you have 2 English teachers for this class. And believe it or not, no student in 4 years has ever asked why. They simply see 2 teachers working so smoothly and equally that it just makes sense to them. It's imperative that both teachers know who is in their class. There is no my students or your students, they are ours. Both teachers interact with each and every student to instruct, support, and assess them. Knowing this leads to deciphering purposeful pairing of students and their placement in the physical space of the classroom. In co-instructing, you're a team, a dynamic duo. With balanced instructional delivery, no one teacher is seen as the helper teacher. Students, parents, and colleagues, administrators all know that both teachers are there working for the success of their collective students. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who could point out who is the general education teacher and who is the exceptional education teacher in a well-done co-taught class. After you've gotten to know each other's teaching styles, an unspoken communication arises. A slight hand movement, a questioning eyebrow raise, a quick nod of the head can help manage distracting behaviors, emotionally charged situations, or just simply signal a tap out. We take instructional timeouts where we check in with one another to make quick, in-the-moment instructional decisions. The mutual respect that we give each other during instruction models behaviors that students start to exhibit without our explicit teaching of it. They respect, honor, encourage each other with speaking, working, and personal space. With the routine of the co-teaching dance, each teacher feels supported and the classroom management issues diminish. Our classes have become families with 2 functioning parental figures leading the way. And our data reflects that students learn the grade level skills and content rather than just getting a passing grade.
Throughout the entire instructional process, teams continue to use formative and summative assessment to make in-the-moment instructional decisions. Teams plan for assessment during their co-planning and use assessment strategies throughout daily instruction, Let's hear more about how co-assessment is used on their co-serving teams.
Apologize for that. My cursor disappeared. So my name is Julie Ross, and I've been a high school science teacher for 16 years, with 6 of those years including co-teaching freshman biology with 3 different co-teachers. Erin Ferda and I are both enthusiastic about presenting to you our experiences together in co-assessment. We're both passionate about authentic assessment of understanding that includes a high level of student ownership. Erin's inclusive work spans teaching ASL, AVID, and being a supervisor for QSA, and advocating for student understanding and engagement in the gen ed classroom for 16 years. She's co-taught with a wide variety of gen ed teachers in almost every department at Sehome. Before working with Erin, I was assigned to work with 2 other co-teachers, one and then the next, with mixed results. I could see merits and drawbacks to the co-teaching model based on my experience thus far. Erin and I were assigned to co-teach together the day before school started 3 years ago. We were friendly colleagues, but we knew we were heading into a professional relationship that would allow us to get to know one another much better, whether we were ready or not. We knew that open communication was going to be the key to our success. Erin asked us to each share with one another a pet peeve. This was kind of an opening conversation for us. This positive kind of vulnerability helped us to get to know one another better and also gave us a heads up on situations that could create conflict in the future. We also committed to being open to one another if an aspect of our working relationship was creating friction. We still hold to this commitment, and we have truly been able to separate our frustrations about specific situations or conflicts from our mutual respect and appreciation for one another as teachers and as humans. On that first day of class 3 years ago, I was trying to find the most equitable words to describe our working relationship to our students. It was super important to us for the students to see us as a teaching team with strengths and weaknesses, not equal, but equally valuable. I introduced us as follows. You are lucky to have 2 teachers instructing this class. My name is Ms. Ross. I have a degree in biochemistry, and I'm here to teach as an expert in biology. This is Ms. Ferda, and she's an expert in teaching, and she will make sure we present the biology in a way that you can actually learn it.
On that first day, when Julie introduced us this way, I felt honored and put at ease. I was way out of my comfort zone in biology, and I was nervous about my lack of science background and the vulnerability I knew would be required of me that year. That first year, I asked a lot of questions. I needed a lot of time from Julie to grapple with the content myself so that I could contribute to our shared classroom and support students. She invested in me, and she invested in our co-teaching partnership, and I am incredibly grateful for her patience, support, and determination. I started a new notebook that first day, and the picture to the left shows my first entry. Our first set of goals were that we like each other at the end of the year, we accomplish more together than we feel we could have on our own, and that all kids in our classes would pass with a C or better. Since then, we've continued to set goals for ourselves, one of which is maintaining a strong partnership. We believe our partnership is the foundation for everything else we do, so we make time to check in. We often will even set a 10-minute timer at the beginning of our planning time, specifically to catch up on our personal lives. For this presentation, we found it challenging to separate co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessment. However, co-assessment has been the pivotal element in our shared practice, so we're going to share our work with you with an emphasis on assessment. We're really excited to share our process with you, and we hope that you hear some things that are useful to you in your journey. This slide shows the steps that we've taken in developing transparent, accessible, and differentiated opportunities to learn in our biology classes. We'll dive deeper into each step in the process during this presentation.
We used NGSS, or the Next Generation Science Standards, to build our curriculum. This is built off of performance expectations that include disciplinary core ideas, which is the content of the biology class, Science and engineering practices, which is enabling the students to have experience in laboratory technique, and cross-cutting concepts, which connects the science to other ideas. We had an opportunity to work for a week in the summer after our first year together, discussing our co-teaching experiences and planning out our curriculum. We took ownership of the NGSS performance expectations by reading, clarifying, and organizing them into logical categories, which became our 6 units for the course. Once we had the NGSS performance expectations organized into a meaningful order in roughly even amounts of work for each unit, we wrote our own student learning objectives for every unit in the class in an I can format, using language that was far more accessible to the students and non-science majors than how the original NGSS performance expectations were written. It was important to us to organize our units using backward design. So next we developed the framework for our summative assessments. Every unit's summative assessment was written in sections, 1 section for each student learning objective. As co-teachers, Erin and I set aside time during prep to physically sit next to one another, pre-COVID, and co-write the summative assessment for each unit. This was invaluable to me as a gen ed teacher because I was confident in my content, but I needed that second perspective to show me how the students were viewing the assessment. The summative assessments were written in sections by student learning objectives, with those objectives clearly stated at the top of each section. I proposed questions that provided the students with the opportunity to show what they know on key content. As an avid trained teacher, Erin applied Costa's levels of questioning to increase the quality of the question wording, presentation, and clarity. Previously, in both mainstream biology classrooms, as well as co-taught classrooms, a standard grading scale was used to determine a student's summative assessment grade. All questions were valued at the same weight or impact on the final grade, and very little consideration was given to the level of questioning applied. Due to the number of students in each of my classes and the amount of subsequent self-imposed grading that needed to be done on those daily assignments, summative assessments were multiple choice questions answered on Scantron sheets. Erin and I knew we wanted authentic evaluation of students' understandings at the end of a unit. This meant that every student learning objective needed to be purposefully represented, and we wanted to focus on making sure we had questions that reflected varying levels of rigor for every student learning objective. We scribed together and edited to increase the number of ways students could respond with both written and visual answers. We read the questions out loud to reduce word count, highlight or bold keywords, and eliminate ambiguity. Finally, we wrote 2 versions of modified summative assessments, which Erin will address in later slides. To help visualize what we are describing, we're going to share a specific example from one unit in biology. As you can see on this slide, one objective is represented by questions from levels 2, 3, and 4 from Costa's levels of questioning. This allows a student to show their level of understanding on any given objective. The level 2 questions tend to ask students to identify information they learned in class. In this case, the student is showing that they can recognize the movements of the chromosomes through the phases of mitosis in provided diagrams, even if they haven't memorized the names of the phases. The level 3 questions tend to ask students to describe what they know. These are not full essay questions, but they may include short answers, such as, what do you see happening inside this cell? The level 4 questions are a great opportunity to ask what if. For example, if something damages a cell, what would be the first change you would see? This gives the student an opportunity to show their full understanding of what should happen and how that would be changed at a very specific given point. Level 4 is also an excellent opportunity for compare-contrast between 2 ideas or objectives to show that the learning is interconnected. Each summative assessment objective section is scored separately, so students know how they performed on standalone objectives. You can see how the scores are recorded by objective on the front page of the summative assessment. You can see in the example provided on this slide that each of the objectives is assessed and graded individually, and the overall score is an average of the scores for each student learning objective.
We design our summative assessments to be as transparent and accessible as possible. We seek to provide opportunities for students to go beyond the standards through some of our level 4 questions, and we also consider students who may benefit from accommodations or supports to show what they know. So we have 2 tiers of modified assessments that we refer to as M1 and M2. Generally speaking, students who receive an M1 assessment benefit from reduced length and clarification or simplification of directions and response options. Generally speaking, students who receive an M2 assessment benefit from embedded notes to minimize the need for memorization, scaffolding with sentence stems or thinking maps, and simplified language. We determine which students receive which assessments based on our knowledge of the student and their IEP if they have one. Not all students with an IEP receive a modified assessment. I will often create the first drafts of the modified assessments, and then Julie and I will review them together for accuracy and clarity. While I may have a degree in exceptional education, it's important that Julie, as the content expert, approves of the modifications because she has a depth of understanding and ensures that we are simplifying without compromising the content. Our goal with the modified assessment is not to make them easy, but to remove barriers that may prevent students from showing what they know. So we want to share some specific examples of the modified assessment questions. This is an example of a level 3 question. It says, the diagram to the right shows one phase of mitosis. Describe what's happening in the diagram of the cell using the correct vocabulary terms and be as specific as you can. So that's the original gen ed assessment question. For the M1 assessment, we provided the vocabulary terms and simplified the directions by listing them one at a time. And then in the M2 version, we broke the question down into 4 small parts and changed the response from written to a visual illustrative response and added multiple choice answers. In addition, accommodations are provided for students, including separate location, extra time, reader, scribe, and verbal response. These accommodations are provided regardless of which version of the assessment a student takes. And this is an example of a level 4 question. It says, compare and contrast cell division, which happens in all living cells, including bacteria, to mitosis, which only happens in eukaryotes, animals, plants, fungi, etc. You may use a Venn diagram, double bubble, draw on examples, and/or write your thoughts as a list or in a paragraph. So that's the original gen ed version of the question. In level 4 questions, we seek to provide wide access points. And we found that when we give students predetermined answers to choose from, that sometimes we may miss out on other ideas and other possibilities that they've come up with. This question allows a student with limited understanding to show what they know. It also allows the student with advanced understanding to show what they know, potentially even making connections or adding information that goes beyond the scope of the class. It also provides space for creativity and individuality. And we get some pretty awesome student additions to some of our level 4 questions. Because this question provides a wide spectrum of access points, we decided we did not need to modify it for the M1 version. As you can see, for the M2 version, we changed it quite a bit. We provided a double bubble thinking map instead of a list of options. We organized the map by adding labels in the 2 primary circles, cell division and mitosis, and we added additional directions at the top of each section. Even though this is a level 4 question, it's accessible to all students because they can complete as much as they can. It's not all or nothing. The score a student earns on a level 4 question could show level 4 understanding, or it could show level 1, 2, or 3 understanding. It depends. These questions are intentionally wide and flexible to maximize the opportunity a student has to share their thinking.
The title on this slide is exactly what we had to ask ourselves once we had all of our student learning objectives, organized our units, and outlined our summative assessments. Next, we wrote formative assessments to evaluate student understanding for each objective along the way. As you can see in the learning cycle on this slide, the students are given this formative assessment opportunity to show what they know, get feedback on their answers, use the feedback to correct, edit, or focus their understanding of the objective, and improve connections between what they understand and continued real-world examples. We created a routine for formative assessments so that the students always know what to expect. We open every class period by referencing the objective for the day. We typically spend 2 to 3 days on an objective, doing activities, lecturing, conducting labs. Then we pause to take a formative assessment and check in to inform next steps. Only one student learning objective is targeted per formative assessment, so that both students and teachers can easily identify which objectives have been learned with confidence and which objectives need more instruction and application time in class. We created a 3-step routine for formative assessments, and we have a slide for each. This slide shows an example of step 1, which is individually taking the formative assessment. Students answer the formative assessment questions quietly on their own. There are usually 1 to 3 questions per formative assessment, and they're often framed so that there is more than one possible way for students to demonstrate their understanding. In step 2 of the formative assessment routine, the class is opened up for discussion and questions. The students are called on to share answers, diagram visuals, compare explanations and examples, and ask clarifying questions. This is not a time to get the answers. Rather, it's a time to edit explanations, to remove misconceptions, and more clearly focus or add detail to correct responses. Students are encouraged to take notes during this time. In the spring of 2019, the students were so used to participating in the formative assessment routine in person that they began volunteering to run the class. We actually had one day where a student walked in, announced that he would like to teach the class, and proceeded to run the class through the formative assessment routine with such efficiency and inclusiveness that I just stood back and watched the entire process for 15 minutes without speaking a word. Out of all the memory moments of co-teaching, this tops my student ownership experiences. The students really fall into the routine of formative assessments. It's critical that students provide us with accurate self-assessment feedback, since we rely on it for instructional decision-making and next steps. In step 3 of the formative assessment routine, students use the self-assessment rubric shown on this slide to communicate with themselves and with the teachers their current level of understanding on the objective, now that they've had a chance to listen to class answers and discussion. We say, "What is your level of understanding right now?" The students are reminded during each self-assessment time that scores are not placed in the gradebook. They are only used to show themselves what to study and to help inform teachers about whether we need to spend more time on that given objective or if we are ready to move on. All assignments in our classes are evaluated on the 4-3-2-1 rubric, which is also printed on every formative assessment. This is what the students use to self-evaluate their understanding of the objective. The only time a student receives a 0 is if we have no information and if they haven't completed any part of the assessment. And again, that does not go into the gradebook. And I'm just going to leave this rubric here for you to see. You'll have slides later instead of reading through it. For some, we realized it took them 2 full months to trust us not to put their scores in the gradebook. In November, we began to see very honest scores that matched their understanding of each objective. It's very difficult for some students to acknowledge their lack of understanding, and it was our goal to help students connect with their own level of understanding so they could target what they didn't completely know and focus on the objectives to prepare for the summative assessment. Students started voluntarily writing self-feedback beyond choosing a number on the 4-3-2-1 scale. We would see written notes like the examples above. For example, I don't understand the way to tell the difference between the kind of molecules, or I need to work on memorizing what goes with what, or I knew more than I thought I did. The summative assessment questions are similarly worded and formatted to the formative assessment questions. So when students got to the unit test, they were pleasantly surprised that they knew exactly what was going to be on it. We got a lot of responses like, "Wow, that was easier than I thought." And "That was just like what we've been doing in class." We used an Excel spreadsheet to keep track of scores by objective. This allowed us to track formative assessment self-scores through the unit, summative assessment self-scores, and summative assessment teacher scores, as well as any reassessments for the objectives separately. We color-coded the scores so that 3s and 4s were given green, as in go ahead. 2s were given yellows as caution, we may need to spend more time, and 1s were a stop. We definitely need to spend more time on this. A quick glance at the spreadsheet would tell us if we needed to spend more instructional time as a class on certain objectives, provide some one-on-one attention for specific students, and correctly weight our review time before a summative assessment. We also could see the satisfying results of students learning to accurately self-evaluate their own understanding.
All right, so we've come full circle now, and at the end of the unit, students complete the summative assessment, or what we call game day. Students receive a score for each objective individually. Students score their own understanding before they turn the assessment into us, and then we score them and return them to the students. Because they can see their scores for individual objectives, they're empowered to plan for targeted reassessment. For example, if a student earns 4s on objectives 1, 2, 3, and 4, but earned a 2 on objective 5, they could choose to reassess only objective 5. This honors what a student knows and gives the student and the teacher actionable feedback. Reassessment was something we put a lot of thought into. We grappled with which types of classroom policies were equitable for students and realistic for us. We ended up deciding to offer a 2-week reassessment window after a unit assessment. During that time, students were welcome to come in before or after school to review and practice, and then they could attempt the assessment one more time to improve their scores. The small pile on the left was from our first attempt at reassessment, where we offered review and reassessment outside of class time. After Unit 1, we reflected on who had taken advantage of reassessment and who had not. Our policy clearly benefited certain students and disadvantaged others. And once we understood this, we changed it. The larger pile on the right is from Unit 2, when we ran review sessions and reassessment in class for everyone. By embedding it into class, we raised teacher accountability, increased equitable access to reassessment and support for all students, and the results were increased achievement. From that point on, we've embedded review and reassessment into our class. If you haven't noticed, we're big on data. The graph here shows the grades for students in co-taught and non-co-taught biology classes over a 2-year period. On the left, you can see the number of Fs in co-taught, in non-co-taught and co-taught biology classes. And on the right, you can see the number of As and Bs in those same groups. In 2019, we had 2 co-taught biology classes with 61 students total, 26 of whom had an IEP. Our classes were large and the needs of our students were diverse. Yet only 1 student in our classes failed to pass biology that year. The impact of standards-based grading and sound assessment practices can't be overstated. So often, students are bogged down by daily assignments. Their mental and emotional energy is taken up with the task of completing work. Many find themselves buried and behind and ready to give up. Standards-based grading shines a light on what students need to learn and gives them space to practice and explore without penalty. It releases teachers from grading endless assignments and allows us to focus on growth and progress as well. We get to coach students, walk alongside them. We get to encourage them and prepare them. Students regain ownership of their learning when learning objectives are transparent and they are participants in the formative assessment process. Co-teaching has made us better teachers. It's given us a critically reflective lens and the collaborative partnership we didn't know we needed. We hope some of our work inspires you to try new things or take next steps. We hope you find passionate people to do the work with, and we hope you get the support you deserve along the way.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about assessment, and this is coming through an English classroom, so looking at it from that lens. But what we found is that we needed to have a thorough understanding of end results. So starting with the end in mind, we wanted to think about what do we want both of our students to know and do by the end of any learning? What are the learning targets and the success criteria around standards, units, and assessments? The thing to remember is both team members are coming from different lenses. One is a general education lens, the other an exceptional education lens. With that in mind, what are the expectations of learning for the class? Do you both agree? Make a plan for when those expectations don't align. Based on standards and students' legal documents, what must all students know and do? Where and for whom does that change? So those are some things to think about. Monique and I have based all of our assignments on well-crafted, evidence-based rubrics. we have been using a 4-point scale where a 3 reflects evidence of that grade level standards. And we call this in our class, you got it. A 2 is a work in progress, meaning with a little more work, you're going to get it. And a 1 is under construction, meaning you've started, but the evidence is still in the early stages. A 4 reflects understanding and demonstration for you could teach this to a classmate. So meaning you could literally turn to someone and explain the why behind the evidence you've shown. These rubrics show that all students are capable of demonstrating evidence at any of these levels. We accept growth mindsets only. Co-assessment begins with co-planning the assignment, the co-writing of the rubrics, or one writes and the other gives input, and then the co-instructing. When all of this happens in tandem, then assessment is so much easier. For essays, we usually calibrate with a few together during planning time. We pull what we think would be a high, a medium, and a low paper, and then we either score them together and talk through them, or we score them separately and then compare. We make a guideline for comments. We agree to approximately how much feedback we will give so that students don't feel a disparity between who grades whose paper. Then we split the papers. What we've done in our classroom is we divide the students with IEPs into 2 piles, followed by the students who are highly capable into 2 piles. Then, based on what we've seen, we try to divide work by evidence equally. Then basically I grab a pile, Monique grabs a pile, and then we score on our own time. But either way, we're fairly guaranteed to have an inclusive and diverse group of papers, and all students benefit from getting both teachers' input. This year, we've been remote and not knowing our students as closely as we have in the past. We have tried giving feedback and assessing the same students for the rotation in order to see growth. This means that I read all of Ian's work to track progress, whereas Monique read all of Dharma's. Usually we split it up so that we get to know all the students and they can tell our handwriting. So in a normal year, when they get a paper back, they know who to conference with. Conferencing days are awesome with 2 teachers. We set up at our desks and meet with students to discuss their papers. As one teacher, this workshop format never worked. There was always one of them, or one of me and 30 of them, so it was always chaos. With 2, we get through conferences very easily. When grading daily work or presentations, we can work faster than alone. We can sit together, we can look at student work, and then determine a score. If one sees it differently, we talk it out, we compromise. But because we've co-planned, co-written the assignment, co-written the rubric, and co-instructed, this is rarely the case. Collectively grading papers and presentations makes both teachers acutely aware of where all students are on their proficiencies and how to support them. Assessment should reflect growth toward a goal, and all students have the right to be assessed with equity by 2 teachers working together around the evidence presented by the learner. Therefore, growth mindset is key for everyone involved in the learning, not just the students, but the teachers, the parents, the administrators as well.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today. A huge thank you to the Sehome team for sharing their passion, love, and expertise. As you can see, this team is fired up and works tirelessly to change the outcomes for students and for our entire community. We know that this work strengthens and enriches our entire community. Co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing are the vehicles we use to dismantle, disrupt, and begin to build a new, more beautiful, hopeful, and inclusive reality. We have a few minutes to open up for any questions. We invite you to put those into the Q&A. Gwen, I think that there's one in there for you already. And I think it's a copy of your rubric that you're using with the...
Yes, absolutely. I would be happy to share that. And I can talk with Christina and Kathy as to how to get that to people.
Yeah, following the presentation, we'll post the live recording on the website as well as majority of the resources shared today. So there'll be a file on our website. Another question about co-planning. How much time are you provided by admin to plan as co-teachers?
I can take a stab at that. So our principal, Sonia, this is a priority for her, and we're actually in the neck deep right now in our master schedule for next year. And Sonia makes sure that our co-taught sections and aligned preps and all of that is prioritized in the master schedule. So almost all the time, unless it's just somehow like physically impossible, we share a prep. So like if I co-teach 3 sections of biology with Julie, we also share a prep on every A day because we have alternating days. And then on my B day, I have prep with the English teacher. So every day that there's prep, we have prep together.
I just will add, having co-taught for 15 years in another school district that did not prioritize that it is such a relief to be in a building where a principal understands the critical nature of that time together, because otherwise you know what needs to happen and you end up just doing it outside of your workday, or you end up not as prepared as you should be, or not having the opportunity to have the kind of conversations that you can have when that time is honored. So I just really appreciate the fact that Sonia has prioritized that, because it makes a world of difference.
I don't think it's possible to co-teach really without it. I think that's where that term like glorified para comes in. Like all you can do is show up and help if you aren't involved in the entire process.
And I want to reiterate what Erin just said. The co-planning is the foundation of teaming, and without that support, without acknowledging that we need the time to plan in our school day, you know, at best you're going to get a glorified para, and so it's crucial. It's a great question to ask.
We have another question. Did you have to hire more special education teachers in order to make this work, or did you utilize the existing staff?
That's a great question. So we started by utilizing our existing staff, and we've slowly grown over time. Last year, we ended up converting some of our like our para hours into certificated FTE because we were seeing the gains of what happens when you have a shared planning. It also enabled us to lower our caseloads, which is a whole other piece of the job of the special educator. So they're not only co-teaching, but they're also holding this caseload. So that was a priority to bring that down. And then after seeing that, we just got news that our district office also approved additional FTE for all of the schools, seeing the benefit of co-teaching and being able, you spread your resources thinner when you're co-teaching, but the outcomes are increased. So that is how we've done it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sehome. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but if anyone has another question, feel free to put it in the chat and we can get the answers to you in another fashion. So we're going to close us out for today. So a tremendous thank you to Sehome High School for sharing an in-depth look at inclusive practices of co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing. If you have some time, just drop some love in the chat and share what you might be able to bring back to your school site. It'd be great for us all to see what your takeaways were. And then another big thank you to the team at Sehome for taking us on your journey and highlighting some key inclusionary practices. We'll provide contact info on our website when we post all of the webinar materials. And then to learn more about the Demonstration Sites Project and OSPI's Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, please visit these websites or feel free to email us at uwdemosites@uw.edu. And you can also visit your website where, as we mentioned, we'll be posting a recording of this webinar along with a folder with resources on the artifacts presented today. All right, we'd like you to join us in our final poll. If you'd log on to pollev.com/hearing center, we'd like to see where you're all joining us from today. We have a nice little map here with all the districts or the ESDs represented. So when you poll, we'll see a little pin drop on where you're tuning in from. I don't see anything coming up so far, but I'm going to walk us through some other slides. We'd love to get your feedback about our session today. This will give us information we can use to effectively share demo sites inclusionary practices in webinar format in the future. So if you would click this link and fill out the brief survey through Google Forms, the survey is anonymous, and Molly Lyman will send clock hour forms to those who are in attendance after the webinar. And then thank you to OSPI and CSCP for their partnership in this project, and another thanks to Sehome High School for your inspiring work. Thanks to all of you for joining us today to learn more about inclusionary practices and for envisioning how you might take some of what you learned today and apply it to your schools. We hope you will join us for future webinars, and that when our doors open again, you will take advantage of in-person visits, visiting our Washington State demonstration site. Right, see a lot of pins. I see ESD 101 represented, 112 represented, a lot representing 121, 189. Wonderful. Thank you all again. Enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you, Sehome.